Tragedy knows no borders or time zones. How did you, or do you, help yourself and your family cope with the inevitable heartbreak that living in a foreign land away from your hometown brings about?
Well, it's something that you can certainly help yourself if you recognize ahead of time that things like that are going to happen. I know in my own case I was in Africa only about 2 months till I got the message that my father had died, and communication was not as good as it is now. I think he was already buried before I even found out he was dead.
Sure.
And strangely enough, I was, that very Saturday that I heard about it, I was helping with the funeral of an African child who had died there, and the people in the area knew that I had something to do with God working in the church, so they came and asked me if I would have a part on the funeral, or I really have charge of it. And so I told them I would be glad to. When I went, there was some tragedy and the problems in doing it. I went early in the morning. It was 2 in the afternoon before we got around to having the funeral. And it was just myself and the 2 parents and the fellow that kept the graveyard. And I said something, and a little bit, in talking about death and what it meant, and how it could be a blessing to us if we would recognize it as God's gift to us. And then the mother and father stepped forward and sang a song. I couldn't understand the language near as well as I could when I left there, but I was just new, but I could understand they were thanking God for having the privilege of having the child for the few weeks that they had had it before it died of malaria. So it was kind of strange. I was busy helping someone else with the funeral while someone was doing the same for me over here in the States. But God helps you with those. They're real, and sometimes the worst tragedies are the ones that happen with you over there, right with you as part of your family, and it is hard, but you go through it. And when you look back on it, you find there are some lessons that you learn that well, you wouldn't say it make it worth going through there, but it certainly is a blessing to have had that, and you can use it to help others when they face the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the difference, because you know, we're serving in Port Elizabeth now, well, almost 40 years after the event, 40 plus years after the event Daddy described, and I can really remember the first time seeing my dad cry that I remember was him sitting on the couch mourning Papaw Duncan's death. And then later Dad had to return from the field in order for Mom to go through cancer treatment, and then the Lord took her. And then we've gone to the field, and Andrea's lost her grandmother, very close to her grandmother, and then we were coming back for Betsy's wedding. July the 7th of this year, but about a month before that, Mrs. Ogle had an emergency surgery and had a massive stroke, and that's Andrea's mother, and we lost her. And it's amazing to think of the difference, because we were there on a phone frantically deciding whether she should get on a plane or not, and purchasing a ticket right there, you know, from a guy in the States online with a computer. But yet it was just as difficult. You feel that moment 10,000 miles away, no matter the fact you're going to get on a plane and get there. You realize that it's one of the, because when Andrea came, I mean, obviously in the States I would have dropped everything and come, but I knew we'd paid for airline tickets to go to Betsy's wedding, and we had kids in school, and so we just had to recognize Andrea's going to have to go and be there alone. And so to not be there with Andrea when her mother died and be there at the funeral was a hard thing, you know, but it was something God got us through. But I won't tell you it was easy, but His grace was sufficient. But she, you know, we're in the grieving process in spite of being in the celebrating process too, with a new son-in-law and daughter, and yet in the midst of all of that, not really a tragedy. Now we've got Beth Ann getting ready to start university, and Andrea needed to be able to go back because she'd spent so much time out of country. So I'm staying here getting Beth Ann ready to start UT in the fall, and I'll leave the 3rd of August and won't be there to help her start on campus like Dad did, me and you, Kenny.
All I could say that the whole experience has been a blessing of being on the field in Africa and getting to know the people there, and it's amazing how they can become your family, and it becomes very real. So if I were younger and could do it, I'd go back again.
I know that's the truth, and it's really a pleasure, like Kenny said early on, to all of the three of us sitting in this same room. It's never going to be the same day. There might be a different opportunity when this is going to be the case, but to know that we can reflect on the goodness of God's work and love in our life, and the joy of serving Christ, and the great example Kenny and I have had in Dad and Mom, and the blessing of Julia coming into his life, and the joy of serving the Lord in Port Elizabeth. We've got so much to be thankful for. And you know, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, and there's no there's no promise in Scripture other than the fact that God is faithful, and faithful is He that called you, and He'll also do it. So I just echo what Dad said. I certainly don't regret 1 minute spent on the field, but I treasure every minute that I do have with my family and my brother and my dad. So it's been good to be here today. And Kenny, you may not have took up an offering, but that barbecue was pretty good.